welcome to the Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I'm your host, Wim Liu. Reminder, we are back in the studio and streaming live once again on Sportsnet's YouTube channel, Monday to Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. To people watching, hello. It's usually Blake Murphy Tuesdays, but we are load managing him for a potential appearance on our Thursday trade deadline 2-hour special. That's right, we are going to have to expand the show because obviously the NBA trade deadline is this Thursday, February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So we are going to extend our show from the usual 2 to 3 to the 2 to 4 slot. So make sure you tune in then, radio, YouTube, podcasts, whatever. But in the meantime, on this Tuesday, I'm joined for the first segment by Raptors Republic's managing editor, Louis Zatzman. Louis, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, man. Thank you for coming on. Look, obviously everyone wants to talk about trade deadline. I'm gonna spare you from that for now because I have a lot planned with Eric Kareen in the second segment. We're gonna break down that scintillating Bobby Webster press conference where we learned so much about the team from the very direct answers from our wonderful general manager. But look, there's a lot of positives to talk about the team as well. I think that's where at this time of the year, people get lost talking trade deadline all the time. But the Raptors are just also playing their best basketball. So let's key in there. The Raptors win last night, taking down the Hornets in Charlotte by a score of 116-101. First off, Louis, what was your biggest takeaway from the win itself? Because for me, I was just really impressed with how easy and relaxed it was for the Raptors to just take down a team which should really be in their tier, but it was very clear that the Raptors were like much, much better than the Hornets, and they held the lead all night. But what was your biggest takeaway from the win?
Yeah, professional win, like you say, just a significantly better team. The biggest takeaway, I mean, LaMelo Ball is an all-star. He's very good, very exciting. Pascal is like a whole tier or two better than
Yeah.
him as a player.
Yeah.
Like there was a couple times where LaMelo was switched on to Pascal, and he had no chance at guarding him. It was preposterous.
Mm.
Pascal is taking double teams, blitzes, switches, whatever. Like in 2018-19 in the playoffs, teams were like, oh, we'll put centers on him and that'll stop him.
Right.
And now you put anything on him and he's still doing his thing. He's on such a hot streak. LaMelo Ball's not going to have a chance when he's used to such ridiculous defenses.
Yeah, there was a very telling play, I think, in the fourth quarter, Raptors, making the push to finally close out the Hornets. Because the Hornets weren't pesky in the second half, not even gonna lie. They played well in the third quarter, ramped up their intensity defensively for about 5 minutes and got a lot of runouts and closed the gap. But when the Raptors needed to put that game away, they gave the ball to Pascal. And there's that one play where he had LaMelo isolated. And I think Melo was complaining about Pascal potentially double dribbling. But he literally just stopped to turn to the ref, was like, hey, that's a turnover. And Pascal's like, no, I'm just going to cross over now and get into the lane and score and through contact. And, he's been playing fantastic. I mean, 24, 11, and 8 yesterday. Pascal just continues to flirt with the triple-double this season. He's had so many games of 2 rebounds shy or 3 assists shy, and it just keeps not happening for him, quite honestly. But in general, he's playing fantastic. What have you thought about the rotations that the team has settled into here? Because they're obviously getting a lot more healthy now. They have pretty much everybody available. I think Kem Birch is still obviously, doing his conditioning stints, and we saw Nick give him 2 conditioning stints. He has his usual 5 minutes in the second quarter, basically the lowest leverage minutes. And then yesterday we saw him also appear in the fourth quarter as well. So that's a nice sign.
Like you said, the lowest leverage minutes.
Well, I mean, listen, I think all minutes against the Hornets are low leverage. That's just not a serious
Exactly.
team. They don't play defense. I think you can safely bring in Kem for most times. But, what have you made of Nick Nurse, his rotation? Because it seems like it's clearly working quite well. Like, there's not really a big drop-off in intensity with the team right now, as there was maybe at the start of the season when basically anytime starters came out the game, the team started looking worse. That doesn't seem to be the pattern anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he's been given a really tough. It's like a millennium problem, one of those unsolvable math problems,
Mm.
right? He's been given a team with 5 initiators, 3 of whom are power forwards, and they all have to start. And
Yep.
then he has 3 centers, all of whom have to come off the bench. Like that is something that most coaches, you show that to them, they don't know the guys. They're like, it can't be done. No one can do this. Well, Nick has done a pretty incredible job. He plays centers together. He says no backup point guard, whatever. The thing that matters when Fred sits is all 7 foot wingspans on the floor at once. He has found really unique answers to unique problems. And like you say, the rotation is working. Chris Boucher just deciding to become solid, making good rotations, just like the opposite of the player he was the past few seasons, really, really helps. Precious Achua is empowered to just play that defense he's so good at and just hit some corner threes, which he's done recently. So, things that sort of weren't working earlier are working now, which helps a lot. And also, when Pascal is playing like this, rotations become a lot easier to figure out. Like you can play three power forwards and a center all at once when one of those power forwards is the best player on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely we'll get a lot into Pascal. But I also wanted to touch on the idea of just like, when you're looking at the game yesterday, for example, the Raptors starters combined for 103 points. And some of that was Scotty at the end, got like a string of points. He got fouled a bunch. He got to 15 points. Okay, whatever. But like still, the starting five clearly works right now in tandem. But I also think that in some of these transition lineups, when they're going to, Precious and Boucher as the two bench guys on the team, or maybe Delano comes in for Precious and they sort of go with a more of a ball handler rather than two centers on the floor. And basically whatever combinations they really want to do right now, it seems like all of it's kind of working, especially in service of the starters who are always basically the ones who are going to take the shot outside of guys getting like, runouts for dunks or putbacks or maybe the occasional catch and shoot three. Obviously teams still do leave Precious and Chris open quite often as they should really. But, are you starting to see sort of that more of that synergy of the team as a whole? Because to me, especially watching the games of late, it seems like their half court offense is a lot stronger than especially even let's say a month ago, where the team was still kind of this team's good on offense, but it's because they rebound the ball a lot on the offensive end, and they also get a lot of extra possessions. So, and they also play a lot in transition, so that kind of inflates the number. I feel like right now, even just watching them execute in the half court, um, there's a lot of like two-man combinations that are really starting to work for the Raptors, where you're not seeing a big drop off, even when they go to the bench.
Totally. I think that's very perceptive. And when you think about a team's identity, you want it to be mutable, changeable. Obviously, right in the playoffs, you need to be all sorts of different things, but you don't want it to be split, right? You don't want to have the starters do one thing, the bench comes in, prioritizes a different thing, because then you're stuck playing a certain way one time, a certain another, that your transition lineups don't work, you're not as changeable. And what the Raptors have started doing, because they were that for some of this season,
Mm.
what they're starting to look like is exactly what you described, where no matter who's on the floor, their priorities on both ends, offense and defense, remain the same. And it's funny you mentioned the half court offense, because if you were to sort of look at a lot of the markers that have defined this season and just zoom out, you don't know what the record is, what the numbers are. You say, okay, they shoot fewer threes, right? They don't have a backup point guard. They're playing their starters 40 minutes a game. They are ridiculous at offensive rebounding, but that means you miss a lot of shots. They run a lot in transition. All of those would combine to say, okay, you're not good in the half court, right? Those are all hints towards that. But like you say, no, they've been very good in the half court recently. It is difficult to explain, but they're making it work at all times.
Yeah, and I think even just to your point about the difficult to explain, I think also guys are starting to show us more, right? I'm thinking specifically about OG Anunoby, some of the plays he made in the fourth quarter, which by the way, OG has made over the 6 game win streak. He's come up with like two or three standout plays in the fourth quarter or in just
Mm.
overtime periods during the 6 game win streak that I put together a little Twitter compilation of this, but I've been so impressed with what OG has done in crunch time scenarios, even without the ball, obviously, because he's not the one initiating most times, but he's giving you a lot. But I mean, you saw that play where Pascal swings at him in the corner, and OG most times will probably take that shot. And I guess the defender Kelly Oubre knew the scouting report there, jumped out at OG, and OG just drove past him, like tiptoed along the baseline, falling out of bounds after evading two defenders, and then with the left-handed wraparound pass out to Fred at the top of the floor right in a shooting pocket for three that made it, I think, a 12-point game with 4 minutes left to go. Like, I think there's more chemistry starting to form between some of the guys. I think Fred and Gary had a great two-man combination that we saw in the third quarter there, where they kind of gave it, did a give and go, give and go, give and go, and eventually, worked up about a foot of space for Gary to shoot the three, and he made it. Are you starting to see sort of just more like that? Whether obviously when the starting five is out there, there's an abundance of options offensively, but when they sort of inevitably rest some of these guys for short periods, whether it's Pascal and OG with the second unit or whether it's Fred and Gary at the end of the first quarter, are you starting to see more of these sort of chemistry moments that maybe also speak to sort of the improvements in the half court offense?
Totally, totally. And I mean, Gary is relatively new to the team. Scotty is very new to the team, so it just makes sense that these moments of chemistry would be building. But it's funny you mentioned that OG pass because for so much of the year, especially when Pascal was out, OG was sort of seen as this potential future star, and we talked a lot about that last time I was on the show. And I think for a stretch there, Pascal was doing so well, and quietly OG had sort of faded back to what he was last year or the year before, which is still excellent player, don't get me wrong. But some of those strides he had taken were sort of on the down low for a stretch. And what you're seeing in fourth quarters is teams really hone in on Pascal, on Fred, on Gary, and OG's like, okay, I can stretch my legs now, right? He can throw those wraparound passes. He can isolate against Plumlee and hit that ridiculous,
Oh,
late clock jumper.
that was nice.
He can drive against DeMar DeRozan, which we saw against Chicago.
Yeah.
He is such a luxury to have as a third option, right? And that chemistry is knowing when to use it. When
Mm.
Pascal's rolling, let Pascal roll for two straight quarters, and OG can just hit spot up shots and not worry, play defense. But then when it's time, he can sort of step up into the spotlight. It's skill, but like you say, it's also chemistry, not stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a really nice pecking order. And I also think that the stars of the team, though, I think that unselfish starts with them, right? Because you see Pascal consistently making the extra pass. You see Fred consistently, like yesterday, for example, double team quite a bit. And they're like, well, Fred's an all star. He's picking us apart. We can't keep him out of the lane. We got to double team him. Well, that's fine. You can double team Fred, but like the rest of the starting five makes plays pretty well. And if you want to give the opportunity for Scotty Barnes to sort of catch it after, Fred gets trapped at the top of the floor and he has a 4-on-3 opportunity, he's going to make the right passes. Or if you're going to allow like, Gary to sort of, if you're going to help off of Gary because you want to rotate and double onto Pascal, well, you're probably giving up a three. And, if you want to key in on OG, of course, he's not necessarily going to be the one that's going to initiate all the time anyway. So it's been really nice seeing them play. And you wrote a great piece about this week on Raptors Republic, which is the home for so many of us. Shout out. But yeah, you wrote a
Former
piece
home.
on there. Well, I mean, it's forever home, man. As long as I'm still invited to the Christmas parties, I'm still
Yeah,
I'm
you still
still
come to the Christmas party.
yeah, I'm still there. I'm still there, even though I'm not. But anyway, you wrote a piece on there called "How Good Are the Raptors Really?" and you really dug into sort of some of the more minute details. And I thought it was a great piece. Everyone should go check it out. It's about a 10-minute read, but it's definitely worth your time. You have a lot of great research and also clips that you've included in there about the Raptors over this sort of 6-game win streak, and even just the Raptors as a whole this season, because obviously it's been a disjointed year, but clearly they found their stride of late. One of the first points you made, though, is that the Raptors have done such a better job of late surviving the non-Fred minutes, right? And if you look at the on-off splits for Fred, when he's on the court, the Raptors are very good. When he's off the court, even overall this season, the Raptors still have not been performing great. But of late, especially since Pascal has returned to form post shoulder surgery and things like this, um, in fact, I feel like they're almost not better without Fred on the floor, but they've done so well that they've been positives consistently when they go to the bench in these moments where Fred sits for about, let's say at most 8 minutes a game.
Yeah, it was on January 2nd when they first ran this lineup. Fred VanVleet sat, Chris Boucher checked in to replace him. And teams are noticing now. Like this is not just a one game sort of, okay, we won 5 minutes, let's table that. This has been every game, 2 or 3 stints a game. They are running 5 guys with 7-foot wingspans, all of whom are athletic. Like none of them are plodding big men. And they're saying scoring doesn't matter. Like Pascal can figure that out. We can get an okay shot as much as we want. But the point of this lineup is we are going to play defense that demoralizes people, that humiliates them, right? Looks that seem open. Oh, there's Chris Boucher. I'm going to drive. Obviously, he one of the best shot blocking, jump shot blocking players in the league. You drive. Okay, there's OG Anunoby. Swing it. Oh, there's Pascal Siakam guarding that guy. Drive. There's Precious. It's like there's so much length and athleticism and rotation ability that, yeah, Fred VanVleet, one of the best defenders in the league, like maybe the best point of attack defender, I think an all NBA defender. And yet when he sits, their defense, I don't know about improve, but it becomes certainly scarier. And they have been not just surviving, like you mentioned, but doing incredible. And when you can play Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam together, you're going to win those minutes. They are that good. And when you can win the minutes without them, well, that's when you have a playoff team because there's only two times they're on or they're off. And if you can win both times, like that's it. You're just winning.
Yeah. That's it's first off, it's a really unique group, right? And I think do you feel like teams are almost thrown off? Maybe they're like,
Oh, yeah.
where do we go? Right? Because sometimes, a lot of second units, they generally run sets more often than, let's say, starting units. Maybe there's not as much like freewheeling and relying on stars. And so, you run sets essentially to create some mismatches and try to attack somebody. I don't know if you can really have a consistent mismatch against guys who are all 6'9" and move their feet with layers of help at the rim. I thought the Hornets, for example, yesterday was a classic example. Like I didn't think they knew where to go offensively outside of just like chucking a lot of threes. And I think that's why the Hornets have shot so poorly from three. I mean, obviously, Hayward getting hurt and not playing the first game obviously impacts things. But even just in general, they just didn't have a lot of answers because, I mean, where would you attack? Let's say you're an opposing team. You're about to see the 6'9" lineup that the Raptors put out there all the time. Where would you go?
I mean, I guess you would try putting Scotty in pick and roll, right? He can make some mistakes sometimes. Delano, once or twice in Charlotte, was so focused on having his arms out in the corner that he forgot to tag the roller when he was in the corner. But that's really minute stuff. Like if you are trying to pick one of these guys and attack them, then you've already lost. And so I mean, looking at these lineups with no Fred, no Malachi, no Gary, when you're just massive, teams take almost no shots at the rim. Like 30% of their shots come at the rim. That's very, very few. They shoot incredibly poorly at the rim and from deep because guys are closing out just with incredible length. You have a lot of guys who can block jumpers. So if I was an opposing coach, I would say, yeah, run your stuff. Don't pick on mismatches. Just see what you can create out of the team offense. But that's almost the opposite of what players have done. They've tried to create mismatches and just pounded their head against walls over and over and over again because the Raptors really like to switch mismatches and just say, "Oh, you think you can beat, Fred with the wing? Well, give it your best shot. You think you can beat Precious or Pascal with the guard? Like go for it." They're happy for teams to attack mismatches. And so far teams have really played into their hands. And I think it'll be interesting whether that works in the playoffs, right? If they're playing say Trae Young in the first round, for example, that's extremely unlikely, but let's just pretend Trae Young's one of the best pick and roll navigators in the league. And when you have this five guys with 7-foot wingspans, closing out, rotating, well, that's when really good pick and roll operators can sort of find seams for layups, for lobs. And so in the regular season, it's been incredible. I'd be curious to see if it carries on, but so far passing with flying colors.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we somehow dance around this, but really one of the biggest things about the Raptors turnaround is just Pascal is playing sensational. You're describing him here as playing like a superstar, fantastic in every play type. So walk us through that. What do you mean by Pascal was fantastic in every play type right now?
Oh yeah, man. So I think in past seasons he's really only been comfortable in the post in an isolation. He has sort of his processing speed is such that when he sees a static defense, when things aren't moving around him, that he's made his best decisions there. But those are really inefficient play types. So he's been good in isolation in the post, very good. But you're not going to get really elite shots there. So he's maintained his being good there. He's also just sort of all of a sudden become the best roller on the team. He creates contact on his screens. He used to just like shy away from contact. Now he's mashing guys. He's unbelievable on the short roll, passing, on the long roll, great finisher. That little like 4 foot, 3 foot floater push shot he does,
Mm.
doesn't matter how much contact there is. That's just going in every time this season. He has been running pick and rolls with Fred screening, with OG or Scotty screening. He has been really, really good at, slinging passes on the move, driving kicks. He's just in transition. He can finish. He had a pass to OG the other last night where he slid a bounce pass underneath someone's hand to OG who drew a foul in transition. He has just been elite in every possible area. And the last time the Raptors had a guy like this was Kawhi Leonard, right? He was a pick and roll star as the handler, as the screener, great in transition, great in the post, whatever. Kawhi was a star. And when it turned to the playoffs, it just meant that the Raptors could roll with whatever punches in whatever series. And obviously, we need to see Pascal do it in the playoffs. That's different from what he's doing right now. But what he's doing right now is what Kawhi was doing then. It's preposterous. He's improved in so many areas all at the same time.
Yeah, it's genuinely fantastic. And I mean, he's been. I mean, look, I know Fred made the All-Star team, and fully deserving. Very happy for him. Pascal's just as deserving. In fact, the last like 2 months, I would say arguably Pascal's been better. I mean, both guys have been fantastic. That's why the Raptors are playing so well. But that's how good
Oh
Pascal
yeah.
has been on both ends of the floor. And by the way, I heard you asking a lot of questions about the spin move yesterday in the post-game press conferences, asking Nick about the spin move, asking about the move he specifically made against Plumlee, which I mean, yeah, he made the move. I don't think Plumlee like even reacted. That's how quick he was with the spin to get to the other side of the basket and put the shot up and won. I think Plumlee only had time to like slightly push him in the back. That's how quickly he was doing it. And then you asked Pascal about it as well. And look, I know people, who are, I don't know how people are still against Pascal, especially with the way he's playing, but some people are still against Pascal. I guess that's fine. But, they'll come back to the spin move and it's a bit of a lazy meme and things like this. But clearly, it's a very effective move. And as you pointed out, it's been working a lot more of late. Maybe is that in your assessment, is it because he's been doing so well on all the other facets of the game that you have to account for so many different moves? And so now teams aren't just only sitting on the spin move. And maybe he's also picking his spots better for that specific signature move of his.
Totally. So in my piece this morning, in 2018, when he was doing the spin move, it was against individual defenders. He would spin because an individual defender was out of position, was vulnerable. And now when he spins, he even said to me, he's not looking at that individual defender. He's looking at the second line, the help. He's spinning now because an entire defense is vulnerable. So, a trade secret for you. Um, I wrote that piece, and for the next little stretch, I'm going to be doing small looks like that for game recaps
Mm.
because my wife and I actually just had a baby,
Oh,
and
oh, that's
so
right. Congrats, man.
thank you.
Yeah.
And so for stretches during games, I, have to be given a bottle and I can't pay 100% attention, until my rewatch the next morning.
Uh-huh.
And so when I find a cool play, I was like, okay, that spin move, I got what I needed. I can pick up the baby. I can turn off the game. I knew what I was writing about. And
Wow.
so that's why I'm doing really nuanced, specific things. But yeah, I mean, Nick and Pascal seem to like it. And it's interesting, right? That you have the pun, I guess, where his career has come full circle, right? He was spinning in his rookie year, now he's spinning again now, full circle, just like this spin itself. So you have that wordplay. It was fun. I liked it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, damn, the commitment is incredible, Lewis. I'll just have to say that actually. The commitment is incredible to what you do, and you know what? It's a testament to your work that nobody even noticed. Any sort of drop off and any sort of additional commitments, and that's a major additional commitment. But your work still speaks for itself.
Thanks,
And
man.
by the way, one of the other stats I wanted to get to before we go is just you wrote here when the Raptors are fully healthy, Toronto's starting lineup of Van Vliet, Trent, Anunoby, Barnes, and Siakam have only played together 14 games, and half of them have come since January 21. Add in Boucher and Achua, Toronto's top seven and likely playoff rotation, and the Raptors only played 13 games all year with those players available. So you're talking about 13 with the top seven in rotation. Lewis, what's the Raptors record with the top seven healthy?
11-2.
Mm,
That is like, and against good teams. These are not weak teams they're beating. We watched them go down to the wire
yep.
against Miami, against Chicago, Atlanta. They are crushing good teams. 11-2.
Yeah. I'm hyped, Lewis. And so thank you for bringing this peaceful and calm energy. I know obviously trade deadline, everyone's on alert, everyone's scrolling. You know, Woj is even excited. He just tweeted out that the Kings have acquired Jeremy Lamb and Jeremy Lamb while trading Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield for, I guess, DeMontis Sabonis more than Jeremy Lamb, but still, wow. Was a very Kingsy move, I would say. But we'll get more reaction to the trade deadline with Eric Kareen in the second half of the segment. But Lewis, you know, you do fantastic work at Raptors Republic. Everyone should follow you there. And just best of luck being a parent, man. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Yep. All right, that's a good spot for us to take a break. I'm your host, Will Lou. You've been listening to The Raptor Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590, The Fan. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, powered by DoorDash. I am your host, Will Lou. I am joined in the second segment by the Athletics' Eric Corrine. Eric, you and I were both just at Bobby Webster, the Raptors GM. He gave a very insightful press conference. Eric, did you learn a lot from our very handsome general manager who somehow manages to look very handsome despite being obviously overworked at the trade deadline, also despite wearing a mask?
Ujiri is making all the individual calls to all the teams. Bobby doesn't have to do anything. It's a low stress job as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, not a whole hell of a lot, which isn't to be
Not a
a
surprise.
surprise. Like I am sort of a veteran of these things, and I will say that maybe there were more hints than I was expecting otherwise. We can get into those a little bit, and a lot of it is, public posturing for sure. Like when asked if they have to trade Goran Dragic for a contributor right away, he's not going to say yes, we have to do it, because that only chips away at your leverage. But I will say he got into not specifics, but some vague ideas that make me think that perhaps they'll be a little less aggressive to do something that maybe moves their pick, or to take on money that goes beyond next year. Like if that's stuff that excites you or interests you, I think it was a bit clarifying. If you want to know names or even player types, you're probably left as in the as uncertain as you were before it.
Right. And we have that clip actually of Bobby talking about the team's recent success and how that impacts the trade deadline strategy. So let's hear from Bobby Webster.
I think if 2-3 weeks ago, before we kind of came together, I think we might have had a different conversation, but I think we're cognizant of what the team looks like now, but we're also realize that it could go the other way. So I think there's a sense of optimism, but also I think obviously with the way players are growing and playing together, I think probably suggests less of a major move. Doesn't mean we don't get those calls and we're not talking about them. But I think the good vibes of the current group, hopefully bodes well for the future.
The good vibes of the current group bodes well for the future. Yeah, shout out Bobby. Just an incredible speaker, especially in these moments. Try not to say too much, but he did say, maybe not as much of a major move. I mean, what do you think of that? Like, do you agree with that strategy? Is that posturing? Is that not posturing? Is if he's being sincere, is that sort of the right strategy? It's sort of like, hey, look, the Raptors have something really good here. Maybe they don't necessarily need to make a huge trade to sort of affect maybe the good vibes of the team.
Well, I don't think that it's much different than what we would have predicted, right? Like, did we really think the Raptors were going to trade one of their starters in this at this trade deadline? I'd be like, I would have been really surprised. Like, maybe there's something that becomes interesting if you throw Gary Trent into a deal, but like that would have had to been a major deal, like something along the lines of what we've already seen today in terms of getting CJ McCollum, or who I don't think really fits what the Raptors want to do, or Domantas Sabonis or Tyrese Halliburton. Like that's the scale of player you're thinking about when you're, and that's like what a major move represents to me, is if you're getting off one of your core players. Beyond that, what we come back to are is moving the Dragic contract, and it was described as unique. I don't think it's unique necessarily, but the rare opportunity to move money that is tied to zero current production and acquire some current production for it. And depending on what you decide to attach to that, whether it's a first round pick, whether it's 2 second-round picks, whether it's nothing, and you're just content to take back a contract of a player that another team doesn't want, you can certainly supplement this group, because God knows they need some supplementing in terms of just like getting through the regular season type of way. So I do think it's the right approach, and if it's in the service of getting this core group more experience and its first real playoff experience beyond obviously the veterans, but your Trents and your Scotty Barnes and if Precious Achua is still going to be playing meaningful minutes, I think that is a road worth traveling down.
Yeah, and that has been consistent with the reporting around the team. I mean, clearly, it's been pretty clear they're not going to move one of the starters. And obviously, Goran is that trade chip along with potentially picks that you would need to sort of attach to him. Which, by the way, of late, when you're looking at some of the deals that have been made around the league, that seems to be an enticing package for teams.
For sure.
And we'll get to that in a second. But let's check on our political prisoner Goran Dragic, still trapped in Miami until freedom comes for him in 2 days. Bobby did have
Godspeed.
yeah, seriously. Raptors legend Goran Dragic. But yeah, let's hear from Bobby on Goran, because I actually thought he said a couple of things there that were quite insightful about his situation.
Sure. Yeah. Just going back to the start, we've always had a pretty good line of communication with Goran and his representative. And even before he left here, Messiah and myself sat down with him and got a sense, and we're having those conversations today. So, they're not, revealing a ton, but I think they kind of know the game we're in and the writing on the wall. And I think they'll probably keep those cards close to their vest as far as what's an ideal outcome for them. But they realize as a, fairly large expiring contract that just has, it greases deals in the NBA, which is the name of the game this week.
So Bobby says not revealing a ton, right, in the conversations that they've had, and they'll obviously continue to be in dialogue. He mentioned he's going to talk to them today, and that I guess Goran's not actually telling them specifically where he would want to go. Not that necessarily that affects too much of what the Raptors want to do with him, but was that a little interesting to you?
It's interesting to the extent that it sort of means that the only type of trade you can make with him is with a team that doesn't expect to get anything out of him. For example, I did a who says no trade mailbag at the Athletic over the weekend, and there was somebody who suggested, and this was before the LeVert trade, but how about Dragic to Cleveland? And if you're that and he could have been really useful to Cleveland. I mean, he could be really useful to Toronto, obviously. So he could have been useful as a backup or a co-creator. But a team that needs immediate help but isn't one of Dragic's desired spots can't really trade for him with the idea of getting him. So I think what happens is it becomes a pure salary transaction now. You can't dangle him as a potential contributor, even though he could certainly be a potential contributor to his team. And that's that's Goran Dragic and his team doing what they should be doing in this position and holding on to their leverage and trying, if his list of teams is, 2 or 3 or smaller than that, that is what you do in this situation, because you don't want to let teams have control in the situation, and you hold on to the control you can have. I mean, it's not ideal for the Raptors. I don't think it significantly impacts them in what realistically they would be able to, what they would be looking to do, but it does sort of limit the kinds of trades that they could explore if they were, inclined to do so.
Yeah, you would think actually with the Raptors pretty much giving Goran every single accommodation, that maybe he would be a little bit more open to working together, but apparently not. Good for Goran, man. You just want to see guys like that succeed, apparently. All right, enough about Goran. It's really my least favorite storyline, and I definitely would love that to be resolved soon, and I'm sure it will be. Clearly, it will be a disappointment if the Raptors just end up buying him out, if only because I think that money could probably be better used. A lot of charities out there, for example. All right, let's move on to the trade deadline chatter portion. So I wanted to ask you this question first off. So while the pre-trade deadline call with Bobby Webster was going on, Woj reported, and he broke the news that the Sacramento Kings have traded Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield for Domantas Sabonis, some other pieces. First off, I think this is pretty clear in terms of how it might potentially affect if the Raptors were in conversations with Miles Turner. I think that's pretty clearly off the table now, right?
Yeah, because this isn't a Sabonis trade in which the Pacers are going into full rebuild mode, right? Like you're getting, like Halliburton is not that far away from being an all-star himself. Like, you know, you can reasonably see a situation where in a year or two he is an all-star. And so it wasn't like the picks and pick swap haul that we've seen in the past for other, you know, all-stars or superstars. So with that said, like, why would the Pacers make that sort of deal, a pick heavy deal with Miles Turner? It doesn't follow. So I would expect based on that unless they're absolutely blown away by a package, like you're not getting Miles Turner for just a Goran Dragic and some combination of picks and young prospects, in which case a deal probably isn't happening for him.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly the whole situation was that both centers at the same time just wasn't the most ideal situation. I don't think even if it worked maybe better on paper than maybe it, I guess it suggested in terms of the numbers, but like I don't think Turner was very happy with that. He made comments about how, he thinks he can do more offensively. He will have the chance to do that now because obviously Sabonis is a guy who has heavy usage. I'm not sure what the Kings are doing. I guess they're trying to chase the play-in spot, but that looks like a bad idea. A post-up player to go with.
I really like Sabonis, but you just traded two, in Hield and Halliburton. You traded two of the players, Hield based on his shooting and Halliburton based on his shooting and sort of more all-around creative game. You arguably traded the two guys who fit best with him.
Yeah.
I mean, Harrison Barnes fits pretty well too, but I obviously like that trade a lot more if it's Fox and not Halliburton going to the Pacers. But then again, the Pacers likely don't do that.
Yeah, and I mean, again, just from the Kings' perspective, I feel like obviously Fox, very fast player, wants to play fast pace. Not that good in a half-court scenario just because of the shooting ability, but of course he definitely can get on the fast break. And you just imagine Sabonis always consistently play on the fast break. I'm not totally sure how all of it works, but that's the Kings for the last 20 years of their existence. From the Raptors perspective, I mean, there were some, I would say, more fringe reporting, let's say non, huge, big time.
Not the big three.
Not the big three. Yeah, I'm not even sure who the big three is nowadays, but
I'm not going to comment or disparage anybody, but I have my theories anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. But the reporting was that the Pacers wanted to push for OG Anunoby in a talk with Miles Turner. I don't think it would have necessarily only been Dragic plus picks. Maybe 2 picks could have got it done. I don't know. But clearly, if their other option was that they can get a guy like Halliburton when you can, resolve the situation by trading Sabonis, then yeah, you would probably expect. I mean, he's not as accomplished of a player as Sabonis, but there clearly needed to be something substantial by the Raptors, and OG would have fit that timeline. Of course, I don't think that would have been the right move, right? And I think you probably agree with that as well. That OG for Turner is not a move that makes sense for the Raptors.
Not at this point. If you see enough eventually that OG, Pascal, and Scotty Barnes just isn't getting the most out of all three, sure. But I don't think we're anywhere close to that point. So yeah, that would have been too much for me for sure, and for the Raptors. The Raptors weren't doing that.
Right. Plus, I'm not sure if Turner's healthy too.
Oh yeah,
that also affects things. Yeah. So, well, there's no shortage of reports linking the Raptors to centers. Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype reporting that the Toronto Raptors are looking to add a center, and they have expressed interest in Jakob Poeltl, Miles Turner, Rob Williams, Nicholas Claxton, and Yusuf Nurkic. He also mentioned that Danilo Gallinari, who's not a center, is a player the Raptors have had an interest in. Maybe just sort of, I guess, worst case scenario, Goran, there's no other deals for Goran. You just flip him for Danilo, who's another expiring deal. Maybe he actually plays for the team. I don't know. But yeah, just to the center point, I mean, I think Bobby also had some comments in his press conference where he said, look, this is the construction of the team right now. We wanted to see how it worked, right? With the fact that they don't have that traditional center, but they're not necessarily married to it. Like it's not, you know, a look that they will go to no matter what. They're not going to return down
Yeah.
Embiid or Jokic or Cat or something like that. But what do you think in terms of the Raptors' needs right now? Is there still that need at center for you, especially when you look at the fact that Chris and Precious have, especially over the last month or so, really started to find their footing in the
Yeah, they're
rotation?
not gonna like the point of that is they're not gonna hem themselves in, right? Like and you know you always want to be flexible enough to put the the roster that makes the most sense together and having you never want your philosophy in terms of style to be so rigid that it keeps you from getting better overall. And I think that was the general point which Bobby Webster was articulating. I've said all along, like I think the the best type of player, and I wouldn't focus here exclusively, but I think the best type of player would be some type of, you know, a two or a three, a wing type who can shoot and either one of add some creation or defend. I think like the creative burden on Pascal Siakam and Fred Van Vliet is pretty high. So like if it were me and you could have absolutely equal players at any position, that's the type I'm adding. Of course, like I think those, you know, perimeter based players are cost more in the in the NBA right now than centers necessarily. So I'm not saying that's going to be possible, but if all things are equal, that's where I would go. But like Jakob Pertl to me is a very interesting one because he is fleet and forget like his past with the Raptors. He's just like mobile enough to be able to do some of what the Raptors like to do in terms of their schemes. And they you don't have to play a strict drop coverage in the pick and roll. And he adds to what you do without fundamentally altering it. So I think like he's an interesting one. Whether he's worth a first round pick, we can get into long conversations about. It's really close for me. But yeah, I think for me, I lean perimeter, and I think more than anything, like a guy who can take some of that playmaking load off of Pascal and Fred would be ideal.
Yeah, and that's consistent with what Michael Grange of Sportsnet has reported as well. Is that the sense, and everyone has senses right now of the front office, but obviously Grange is very attuned. Is the sense is that they're more likely to drill down on finding a playmaking wing that can shoot rather than simply a shooter or another big. And they're willing to keep playing undersized fives and sort of oversized wings and sort of see where that takes them. And you know, I think my only concern with that is does that concern you in a way in terms of in the playoffs how a lack of size, especially when games really start to slow down and the physicality really ramps up. Does that worry you in a way, or maybe this is also a good chance for the front office to see and assess essentially if that strategy does specifically work in the playoffs or not?
Yeah, I think like your second, what you just said is it, right? Like it's more chance to learn. It's more chance to see how far this type of approach can take you while knowing that, you know, you're still obviously hoping for future development from Scotty Barnes and from OG Anunoby and, you know, even Pascal, who's playing unreal. Like you're still hoping for that sort of development to help you get better at this style of play. But you know, obviously you don't want to play Philly in the first round because there's nobody to guard Joel Embiid. But saying that, what can you do against Joel Embiid in this series? In a
Yeah.
series, if it does come to that, like that, as far as just let's get an answer for this experiment, like there's no better scenario for the Raptors. And as long as you keep the big picture in mind, that doesn't mean you don't try to take the opportunities when they come. And the East looks a bit different than we imagined it would. But if you if you're just not a prisoner of the moment and don't get stuck with the Raptors playing their best basketball of the year and having to go all in right now and having to shore up every last hole this team has, and you allow the core to get those reps and the philosophy to really be tested, I think you're looking at. I think this is the way the Raptors are looking at it. It's like there's no bad outcome here. And I think with that in mind, that will inform what the Raptors do. And that will involve sort of, helping around the periphery of what they're building without drastically altering it.
Yeah, definitely. And that is the sense that the Raptors will not make a major move. Definitely try to get something for Goran. And I mean, I think the starting five is going to be pretty consistent too. I mean, look, it'd be very hard to knock off one of the 5 starters at the moment. I think, you might argue the balance might work a little bit better with a true center or whatever, or even just not even a true center, but more mobile center, like let's say Jakob. But I mean, just these guys are playing great. Like yesterday, the starters combined for 103 points. It's not necessarily something you need to shuffle around here. Last thing before you go, Eric, I wanted to get your thoughts on the 2 blockbuster trades that have happened in the NBA. I guess today so far, and there's still a lot more time in the day. So definitely, I'm going to continue to refresh my phone at an unhealthy rate. But first, the Pelicans acquired CJ McCollum, Larry Nance, and Tony Snell from Portland for Josh Hart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Thomas Satoransky, and Didi Luzanda and picks. First off, did you know about Didi Luzanda? And if I had asked you if he's a forward guard or maybe a shortstop prospect for, like, let's say the Oakland A's, what would you have answered there? Because
well, that's clear. Didi Gregorius, impacting you in terms of calling him a baseball player.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a prime who he play for candidate.
Definitely. I wish Alex was here to answer for that one.
Yeah, like I've already forgotten who he plays for. I had not heard of him. Teams in New Orleans position make me nervous around this time just because they're so obviously trying to placate a star and make a situation work in the present. And especially when that star hasn't been healthy, like it feels like a really iffy situation. Saying that, like, I don't hate the price for them. Like
They're playing well.
think, I think McCollum's kind of underrated. Like he's gotten to the point where he's underrated, just because he makes the money he makes. But like we've seen him like that. I think it was the same year the Raptors won the title, that series they had against Denver. Like he was making all those plays down the stretch for the Blazers against the Nuggets. So I don't mind that move. I like that trade. And I like Larry Nance a lot. For Portland, I like that trade a lot more than I did the Norm Powell, Robert Covington trade.
Yeah, at least they got some picks. Although it is kind of sad seeing CJ and Dame split up, but definitely it was time. All right, we have actually run out of time, Eric. So I just want to say thank you for joining us on the show, and good luck on covering of the trade deadline. I'm sure there will be very little sleep for either of us. So that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Loon. You've been listening to The Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review our show. As a reminder, we're back in the studio and streaming live once again on Sportsnet's YouTube channel, Monday to Friday at 2 and 3. And also thanks to our guests today, Louis Zatzman, Eric Kareen, to our board producer, Derek Bandeo, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping us behind the scenes with the YouTube stream. I will talk to you soon.